And we are live here to chat about all of the TV we've watched these past couple weeks. It is fall. You can tell that based on the fact that I'm dressed like a witch. And by that, I mean I grow dark hair and dark eyebrows out of my head naturally. I'm joined by Carey and Kate, and I'm really excited because we're very spoiled this week. We've got two huge finales, Agatha All Along and Only Murders in the Building, to talk about today, plus like a lot of other good TV. Do you bring me any news?
I I can go first. I bring some news. I was actually kind of framing it to wait on the coattails of your news being the Chiefs game. And I was just going to kind of tack on that, much like you can't help but bring up Taylor Swift, I can't help but bring up Critical Role. And they were at the Chiefs game. So I just,
Were they actually at the
little
Chiefs Broncos game?
I think it was the Chiefs Broncos game. The not the whole cast, but the one of the husband wife pairs, and they brought their son, and so they were on the field. I don't know why they were there, other than to just see the game, but
Was that
they were
American
there, and
game?
yeah. And then
Wait,
the
so
the
they were
more
okay. So if they were at the Chiefs game this week, that means they got
yes.
to see like the really incredible Chiefs versus Broncos game. Because I guess like that is kind of my news this week. That's all I've got to contribute. That the Chiefs are still undefeated. I know everybody boos, everybody hates it. It is also America's team. You win some, you lose some. So the Chiefs are undefeated, and America is not. That's it. That's the joke. But the end. Please continue.
Okay. Okay. Um, so then in more actual news, I've seen a couple different shows be announced or whatever, and I haven't taken notes about everything, but one show I am looking forward to is Black Doves. It
Mm.
is a spy thriller TV show on Netflix starring Keira Knightley. So
Ooh,
that'll be on Netflix in December, starting like December 5th.
we love her.
Yeah, we love her.
That is indeed good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I will be quick. I think Marvel had their D23, I think is what it's called, in Brazil, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, somewhere like that. And so they released a lot of new trailers for products that they have coming out in February and in May, and that includes the new Captain America movie with Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford, and the new Thunderbolts movie with Florence Pugh and a bunch of other folks who are really cool. But let's be honest, that's the reason we're going to see it.
Mhm.
They're coming out in February, Black History Month, Captain America, dig it, and in May. And what I can say is that based on the trailers that I have seen and based on the recent products that Marvel has put out, it seems like they have found their footing and they're getting back to making products that are not only like legitimate, good, solid products, but I think they've got the public back on their side. So it's good momentum for them. Let's see if they actually deliver on what they have shown us.
That's really exciting. I'm needing like Marvel to have a bit of a renaissance and a repush. I know they're always continually putting out stuff, but I need them to have another moment to kind of draw us all back in. Because whenever that happens, DC inevitably follows with an attempt as well, and that is just entertaining for me. Um, so that is all the news that we have to bring, but we are still waiting, certainly, when we get into the Agatha All Along and Only Murders in the Building of it all, with like kind of bated breath to know what's going on with their next seasons, if they have next seasons. And that's pretty well tied into like a lot of what we'll talk about today. So let's kick it off with Agatha All Along. Now, with Agatha All Along, we had a bit of a like 2/3, depending on how you see it, part finale. It was a very interesting format, and all of the flashbacks are kind of concentrated towards the end of the finale. Now, the last time we talked about Agatha All Along, the only thing that we had left was the finale. It was multiple parts that we hadn't seen, but they were all dropping at the same time, and you can see they all kind of flow together. So now that you have seen and kind of consumed the finale, you know the format, the flow, and this choice that they made to backload all the flashbacks, what did you think? Did the finale work for you? What in the finale worked for you?
Carey?
What I appreciated about the way that the way that they told the story in the finale is that it sort of makes you question a lot of the things that happened obviously previously, and that's obviously the point of it, right? Um, and so it made me and I have a particular question, and I'm wondering how you guys feel, but it sort of made me reevaluate how I felt about Agatha, and more importantly, how I'm supposed to feel about Agatha based on what we've learned about the choices that she made in some ways for obvious reasons, and then the choices that she made apparently out of grief or whatever sort of drove her after that. So, like I said, what I appreciate about the way that they told the story, it sort of made you reevaluate what you thought you knew about her going into it, and sort of also helps to sort of make you reevaluate the story all along in terms of the motivations for certain people,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of would they have done sort of the same things again based on what we learned about them. So that's what I really appreciated about the way they told the story and the finale and how things got wrapped up.
Yeah, it's such a character study the way it's all laid out. It's a character study in a similar but different way to WandaVision being a character study. And that's why I was so fascinated to kind of pick y'all's brains on what you liked or what didn't work for you about it based on all of our previous history of what we've discussed with WandaVision and what we loved in WandaVision and what, if anything, didn't work there. Kate, I know you were kind of freezing and unfreezing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. It, I did enjoy the final few episodes. I do think it actually suffers similar from some amount of, it has a lot of momentum in the final episode, and then they kind of have to cut it off at its knees. And it's a very common complaint with WandaVision, and it carries over here. And I think weirdly, I can spin that as a compliment, because it's basically the same showrunner, and I think she was the same main writer, but the person in helm a lot of the creative direction of the shows is the same person. It's Jack Schaefer, I believe is her name.
Mm-hmm.
And I I think I can identify that one of her writing trends that we have at least some amount of collection is she likes to write things that seem like they're going to be this massively complicated, you could never piece it together, there's so many moving parts, puzzles, but there's also this like glaringly obvious answer that could make it feel, like you've been told repeatedly, but it feels too obvious, so that way you don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end, it is revealed. It actually was kind of the obvious answer, but in a unique way, in a twisted way, and that makes you more empathetic to some of the quote unquote bad people, and more questioning the quote unquote good people. And I think it's a really fun way of writing, and I think it's a fun way of showing all these characters, especially how morally gray all of these characters are.
Mm-hmm.
What I think it is really obvious is if this were in its own self-contained universe, or if it were just these two shows within a universe and it didn't have to rely on the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to make sense, I think those both shows, the finales would have been even stronger because it would have been able to kind of muster and maintain the momentum it had, because it does kind of really gain all this momentum and then kind of runs into a flat door waiting to figure out what's going to happen next, where these characters are going to be used, whether or not there's a second season or not. The characters exist within a greater aspect, and they have to kind of leave them in place where anybody else that's going to use those characters can use them. And I think that's kind of always what happens with Marvel, is they have a lot of momentum and they kind of have to leave it in a place where you don't really know where it's going to go, so that way they can put it in any direction they want. And I think because we've all really liked both WandaVision and Agatha, and they have these specifically similar tendencies, I think it's become more and more apparent that that's what's actually happening. that these shows are masterful executions of character development and character analysis. And what ends up happening or giving, like, even within the show, what ends up giving it a poor taste in the mouth is what they have to do at the end, and kind of cutting off their theme,
making it play with the rest of the world and not be world creating or world ending in a sense. It's interesting that kind of
exactly.
ties into kind of what I wanted to know specifically in terms of both the plot structure and the character development is that we don't see a true hand wavy, it's all a dream moment, but there are aspects of that. There are the trappings of it's all in your head. There are the trappings of this being mentally constructed. We see really interesting moments of that. For example, Rio cutting out the scenery of the Witch's Road, and then we see it quite literally sort of spelled out within the plot itself, what is constructed and what's not constructed. So, what aspects of I'm not going to call it it's all a dream, but the fact that some of this is mentally constructed worked for you, and what aspects of that didn't work for you, both from a plot perspective, if that's your focus, or from a character development perspective, if that's your focus? What about that worked or didn't work?
What I'll say is, in terms of how the worlds were built to whatever degree, in terms of taking someone's fantasy and creating a reality out of it, right? Obviously, we saw that in WandaVision through the way they told their stories through the sitcoms and television shows that Wanda grew up watching, and that's sort of how she dealt with her issues and the grief that she was going through. And so to sort of see that happen with how the road was depicted in terms of taking elements of what was important and what were pieces of Billy's life and sort of see them manifested on the road, I think that was sort of obviously helps us get to know his character a little bit, particularly for someone we were just introduced to. So I think that's an interesting way to sort of weave in who he is and what's important to him. Um, the sort of the thing that I'll sort of come back to in all of this is the worlds that, well, let's just keep it with Agatha all along, the world that he created and what he ultimately wanted to have by basically traveling this road and what he got. The question would be for me, after he sort of realized what it indeed was it worth it, and would he have done it again knowing what it cost, right? And so that's the part of it that's like intriguing to me, and like the kind of thing that I like to sort of dig into and think about. um, so those were my particular takeaways for sure.
Was it worth it, and would he do it again is such an interesting question to think about in the context of how the show ends. That is, when it's setting up for the next season. While they're not doing the exact same thing again, you are very much led to believe that these are two people who are about to do shenanigans again.
Mm-hmm.
And if he would do that again, no,
Well,
is he willing to make the same sacrifices? Affect the same people in the same way, kill.
yeah. Well, and another thing that I think is really interesting about how they played this was it really is, even more than I think we initially realized when we first watched watched the first part of the show. It is a respin of the concept of WandaVision. Initially, kind of was framed as like it's more from Agatha's focal point, and so we got the introduction of it's like a gritty detective show, and then we only got the one show, and it was kind of messing with how your perception of what this was going to be. And then it eventually pivots into it's a Maximoff, and it is a Maximoff dealing with a onslaught of emotions and grief and trauma and pain, and dealing with it in a somewhat fictitious, augmented reality, I guess you could kind of call it, within the magical spin to deal with all these emotions, and them not realizing, one, they're the cause, and two, it's only augmented, it's not fully dream. So I think it's the augmented versus dream state that really puts a lot of what's happening into question. I think if it was all a dream, or if it was one of those things where, in a lot of sci-fi shows where everybody's body is safe and it's just they all think that they're in a simulation, or they're in the simulation, they all think it's real.
Mm-hmm.
The spin might be different, but people actually died because it's augmented. It was people were still dying in this simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting how there is a tone of, because of who died and how many people saw it, there's an air of forgiveness that's already being laced upon Billy about, and I would say that he has moderately more understanding of what's going on. He realizes he's on the witch's road. He realizes that people are dying. And you compare it to what happened with WandaVision. Wanda had no idea what was going on and nobody died. And I think it's a fascinating kind of comparison of just those small little differences really show, okay, how are we evaluating this? And of course, with WandaVision, you're kind of viewing it from a frame of, she used to be a hero, is she still? Whereas he doesn't necessarily have the context of being a hero, but he's teaming up with people who very much have the context of being villains. And I think that just leaves such an interesting dynamic of, we know Wanda's out there. Like, she has to be. So when they finally do come into contact, what's that going to be like? And even when they go and find Tommy, when they explain to Tommy what's happened, what's Tommy's reaction going to be? Because Tommy has nowhere near the amount of power as Billy, at least in the reality warping type of way. And it would be interesting for him to kind of be the more vision of the pair and be the more, well, you shouldn't do that, and that's wrong, and and be the more black and white character. And I think there's so much potential for all these different character interactions, and I just am curious to see where they're going to take it, whether it be a second season or just in the future with these characters.
I was hoping you would point out the difference in how Billy is treated and how Wanda was treated, and you did not disappoint. There's something you pointed out that I hadn't even thought of, which is her history of heroism and trauma, and his lack thereof, because he is young. It's not that he's certainly been through some things, but she's been through far more trauma than him, and has likewise had demonstrated partnership with the Avengers team, and just being on the side of right from time to time. At the point that at the end of WandaVision, everybody, well, not everybody, but enough people to frustrate us, were just so adamant that she was this awful, terrible, no good, very bad person who held these people hostage in their gardens or whatever, and who could think of anything worse. So it is nice to see this sort of contrast, and certainly folks are not reacting to Billy the same way.
Well, there's something that softens Billy a little bit in this particular story, at least as far as I'm concerned. Well, no, not even that. Maybe his naivety, but not even that, to be quite honest. I think it has more to do with, once we understood what this story was, as soon as those witches showed up, quote unquote, for the witches' road, they were doomed. They were going to die. That's what happens to every witch that shows up for the witches' road with Agatha. So we've come to realize that they were going to die. What softens Billy to any degree that you want to soften him is that his augmented reality at least gave this set of witches sort of an opportunity for closure in whatever form or fashion that they received it. And quite frankly, we had one who did not die, right? When we know every other witch that came on this road did. So, at least in that respect, Billy was able to give these witches something that no other witch who had taken, quote unquote, this trip on the road with Agatha had gotten before. So I think that softens him a little bit.
Yeah, Agatha, that's a good point, and Agatha makes that point. Technically, you saved one. You didn't. You got a net save of one rather than a kill rate of multiples or whatever. And it's a fair point. And similar to Wanda, it's not entirely clear at any point whether he's intentionally choosing to kill. In fact, the argument could be made that he is never choosing to kill. He is perhaps making subconscious choices that lead that direction. Entering season 2, I would argue, is potentially a choice further in the direction of being okay with killing or being okay with death. I'm not judging him. I'm just pointing it out. That's all. I love a good, morally gray character, and a morally dark gray is also good. And, wherever you see him on that spectrum, I'm totally fine. So this is coming with truly no judgment. Let me reassure you. But I do think throughout there are some at least subconscious choices that push in the direction of death. And not just Agatha pushing in the direction of death, which is a whole other thing, and notably one of the best parts of the season, and she should do that more. So we've started to dance around the idea of season 2. What do you guys want to see in season 2? Do you want to see a season 2 at all? And if so, do you like the aesthetic that they've kind of very clearly laid out what season 2 would be in terms of tone and vibe?
I am kind of. I don't necessarily want a season 2 of Agatha all along. I want another Jack Schaefer led TV show with her wheelhouse of characters, because I do think I like the freedom that the one season miniseries gives these people, these creators, because what it means is they get to frame shows as this is what the focus is, and then they get to pull it out from under you. So with Agatha all along, kind of the whole trick is you're like throughout the show you're kind of constantly being like, why does it seem like Billy is actually more of a main character than she is? And then you get the reveal of why it was they were still able to put it as her being the focus, as basically she was the witch's road. She has the entire lore of it and everything else, and basically tying their two histories together in a certain way really lends factor to it still being her show, even though he had equal amount of sway in what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think going forward, they could have another show and it be more of a show focused on Billy and his search for Tommy. I know there's other talks about how they'll have a Young Avengers or whatever movie with a bunch of other characters from around the Marvel Universe. I'm not sure what it is. Carey, you might know better. But my guess is they'll probably want to have the Go Find Tommy adventure before they do the Young Adventures movie,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just specific character driven search focusing on Billy, and they probably don't want to have to do that in a movie. And I personally, I wouldn't want that in the movie. I'd want this to be like a him helmed TV show. And then in whatever fashion they might bring Wanda in, they might not for that. And then they can have those characters and do whatever they will within the major Marvel universe.
Um, I certainly agree with that thought as well. The what I would like to see, whether you call it season 2 or whether you call it a different show or whatever the case may be, but I am particularly interested in sort of where Jennifer, her name was Jennifer, right? Jennifer Gale. I'm
Yeah.
really interested to see where she goes from here after what 100 years or however long it was that she was without her powers, and sort of how she lost them, and that sort of thing. I would be really particularly interested in sort of seeing where she goes from here. And spoiler alert, if you're not like deep down into like Marvel stuff, and I'm not going to say that I am, but you sort of pick up things on the internet. Apparently, she is related to, and I forget exactly how, I can't remember if it's by as a brother or a cousin, but she is related to Ghost Rider.
Ooh.
So I think that would be a really cool opportunity to sort of bring that character into the Marvel Cinematic Universe to some degree, even though I would argue he's already been there through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but we know how Marvel treats Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, but no, that's the story that I'd like to see going forward, and obviously having the opportunity to include Ghost Rider just sort of makes it for it sort of cements that yeah, that would be a good story to follow. But I also agree. It's like it's in crazy. It's like not so much what story is. It's about who's telling the story. And like you said, Jack Shaver did a fantastic job. And it's like give her more opportunities to tell stories. And I think you can't go wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like any sort of limited event series piece that is within this realm and with this similar creative team, character overlap, if possible, I think they bought good faith. WandaVision blew it out of the park, but with Agatha all along, there was a chance for it to be lackluster, to be um, a lower quality, no payoff at the end. And even up till the end, we didn't know. We didn't know if it would end in a satisfying, intriguing way that whether it ties it all together, it ties enough of it together to really fit squarely in the WandaVision universe and live up to that quality. And I think it really did. And it bought then this it bought freedom for me in that whatever they put out in this universe, I feel confident I would watch it and I feel confident I would like it. If it's Billy focused, if it's focused on the other witches on the road, or if we get a couple of those and then eventually down the line we get like the Agatha and Wanda season and they're doing some sort of buddy cop thing or play on some other genre, that would be really fun too. If we got a Rio focused season, etc. I'm sold. I'm down. The Billy focused season seems the most likely. It is perhaps what I would be least interested in, but I'm here. I'm bought in. I'm bought into the universe. I'll, sign me up. Count me there. Day one. So let's toggle over to our other finale that we also had not seen last time we talked, and kind of took us all by storm and left us in a similar place of setting up for the next season, and that's Only Murders in the Building, which had action, it had weddings, it had murder. So let's start with action. What did you think of the wrap up to the Maybelle being kidnapped / held hostage storyline? Because last time we talked, we had just had that bomb drop. Did that sort of finale / wrap up piece deliver on action, on mystery? Did it live up to whatever we were speculating about last time we talked?
All that's coming to mind is the drawn out bit of them crawling around the awning, the outside of the building.
Slide.
Yeah, slide.
I will say this. I don't disappointed is not the word, but based on the story that they told us, obviously this quote unquote former stuntman who had perpetrated these killings, how he took out Saz and how he took out a man in the hospital was pretty like direct, right? Pretty straightforward. And so it was a little surprising the deliberation that he had with Mabel, and certainly it was a little bit different because he there was still an end that he was trying to reach in terms of having her help doctor the script. Um, but it just felt like it was a little too deliberate for someone who's shown that they are pretty sort of efficient at being a killer, and to sort of be outwitted to be outwitted by Mabel isn't the surprising part, but to sort of have the upper hand taken from him by Mabel and a couple of like octogenarians, that just sort of felt a little, yeah, this is what we have to do and this is what we have to work with. But I guess at least it was saved by the killing shot delivered by one of our favorite criminals. So that was sort of satisfying. But how to get there, a little weird, I guess is the word I would use.
I will. It's kind of broken up some trends that they've established for themselves, and it's it might not be quite obvious, but So in the first season, they had Jan as the murderer, and she, I mean, for the lack of a better term, is lost it. I mean, she is a fascinating character. I love it when she returns because she is so interesting, but there is a instability in that character that makes everything she says unreliable.
Right.
The second season had, I can't remember her name, but it was the assistant for the podcast, and that was a very career focused decision that she killed to further her career.
Mm-hmm.
And then in season 3, they had, in a similar way, career driven, but it was also a protective decision between mother and son.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first 3 seasons had a female murderer or a woman within the pair of murderers. And this is the first time we've had a guy be the sole culprit.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also it is now the third time that there is some career motivation. And it was, to me, the most obvious one of the 4. It was also weirdly the least convincing. So by episode 4, when you first get his first episode where he's doing the overview, he has so many secrets and so many things that are, you can't dismiss as quirks. It becomes more and more evident that he is strangely cutthroat for a person who is that awkward.
Mm-hmm.
That episode really is what put him on my radar and really started to convince me he was it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that then starts to kind of lose you, it is again how well he is at planning at certain things and how much he just fumbles the ball on other things that, like you were saying, it feels kind of inconsistent with how it's done, whereas in previous seasons it's been pretty well calculated, pretty well kept, and it felt convincing that whoever took them down, or in whatever pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that it felt weird that the 3 of them, yeah, there was 3, they should outnumber him. For the stuff that he's describing, it felt strange that was a quote-unquote balanced scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then to lead into, the murder we got next, I'll keep my hopes up, and I'll leave it to them to change my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we had previously talked about it had to be a high profile character, whether it's a character that's closer up in the billing sheet, so to speak, or it was somebody that within universe would have caused a lot of news, such as a celebrity. And it wasn't either of them. And it's a character that's been there since the beginning and has at some point kind of been endearing, but it was surprising that it was the bellman and not anybody more important, quote unquote. And maybe it's because we've talked it up and we were expecting one thing and it was a different thing, but it does kind of feel like they were planning for Retta, and then they were able to convince her to stay for a few more episodes. And they're like, well, we can't kill her.
I think that with the Bellman, it does seem okay. So first of all, I was like, wait, we can't be wrong. How are we wrong? That doesn't make any sense. So I was resistant on that front. And then I was resistant on the front of like, this isn't a main character. It is a character that we emotionally may feel a certain way about just based on who he's been, but it didn't feel like a main character. But I think one way they could play it with the Bowman that could really get to us is if they essentially use him as a proxy for Oliver and Charles, meaning all of this idea of like, how do you pass when you are older, and what is it like when an older person passes? I think we're supposed to believe that the Bellman is older than Oliver and Charles, but not billions of years older than Oliver and Charles. He is older by, a decade, couple decades, whatever the situation may be. So we're dealing with somebody who's passed, who is an older gentleman, right? And it will be interesting to see how Oliver and Charles react to that. And for Charles, we saw him react to Saz's passing, and that was very personal to him. So I wonder if the Bellman passing will somehow play in like Oliver's like grand fear of mortality next season.
I could also see them leaning more and more into how Mabel feels, because sometimes, like, in some seasons, we've really had moments where you can see that she truly cares about Oliver and Charles. Mm-hmm. And they did have some really touching buddy moments of like, I actually care about you guys moments this season. Mm-hmm. but it wasn't as many as we had in the past. And I think if it were something closer to home of, similar age, similar personality, similar all these things, we might also get more of a, okay, remind us again why Mabel still hangs out with these guys.
Yeah.
What I also agree that I was less than whelmed when realizing that this was going to be the murder heading into the next season. But what I hope and what I feel like that this gives the storytellers an opportunity to do was something that they sort of did in the last season and can sort of build on when they had the episodes that were sort of felt like found footage sort of episodes. And by that I mean this Dorman Bellman guy, sort of in the background, but he's the character that sort of sees everything that goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so going into next season, we may see the Arconia, we may see these characters through his eyes in sort of a what's the word? I'm not going to say surveillance, but sort of in a way that we don't always see the characters like when they're sort of the center of attention. So from the
Mm-hmm.
background, when no one's paying attention and they think no one's paying attention. So it gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about how other people view our three main characters through a lens that might not be so flattering. And so I think that is a good narrative device that I'm hoping that they take advantage of, because it feels like the only sort of thing that makes sort of sense narratively to take out someone who's sort of in the background.
Yeah. Okay. I To kind of piggyback onto that one, my other kind of resounding complaint, and I've done this before with the show, is that they had the loose ends. But we talked previously earlier this season, they pointed out there was loose ends because Saz had noticed there was loose ends. And then they never really did anything with it. It was mentioned, it was brought to the viewer's attention that Saz has noticed that in previous seasons there were some loose ends, but it was never honed in on who it was, why those were happening, whatever. I almost wonder if they already knew what they were going to do of who the murderer was for season 5 and planned ahead and said, we're going to leave this little breadcrumb in season 4 and basically point out, hey, there's a lot of things missing. And then, like you were saying, have a third party perspective of, season 1, 2, and 3 or whatever, of all these different moments where other people in the buildings have even noticed, hey, this weird thing happened, this weird thing happened, this weird thing happened. I guess it was connected, but we don't understand why. Come to find out, it was a separate murderer doing something totally different, and it's only now that this person is finally struck.
Yeah. I it's interesting to kind of think through where do you continue to go each season and how different that question is than when we pose it with regard to something like Agatha All Along, where they've only had one season. So there's sort of the world is your oyster, and if we like it, we could like the spectrum of other things. Whereas with Only Murders in the Building, if I can say something kind of like annoying data-ish, it's almost like there's multiple data points, so now there's a line. It's not just like, oh, we know this is good and let's see what other good places it goes from here. It's like we've got these consistencies that because we've overall like the season, we value it, and therefore we value this line that's connecting them. So we feel like there's less possibilities for the next season, and in fact anything that seems kind of out of the possibilities for next season is out of that line. But if they were to only do exactly the same thing over and over, then we would get tired of it. So it's this weird catch 22 when it comes to looking to next season. It can't just be a matter of adding more murders, although it seems like, we're starting with 2 at least, maybe, question mark. It can't just be a matter of adding other ways to tie into the building, although they've got 2 ways to tie into the building. We've got the bellman, we've got this guy who's mysteriously disappeared / murdered, and might be tied to the building, might not be, we'll see, whatever. They've got to keep upping the ante while still staying in this like general trend line that we like. I overall, each season I've had some complaints, but each season I've had infinitely more likes than dislikes, even in the face of clear plot holes, some of my favorite characters being the only ones who don't return. For example, we have every single character who's ever existed on this show coming back except Cara Delevingne. That seems like a personal insult to me. Like, despite all of this, I still overall like each season as much as the one before. Mostly, season one kind of holds a special place, but you know what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So I'm still excited for next season, even though it's question mark the Bellman really. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, there's still a good chance that Kara may very well come back because, again, I think we're going to start seeing old and new stories through the eyes of the Bellman. So there's that chance that there's flashbacks and she gets to come back. I did have a question. If I don't know if you were going to ask it, and it didn't just pop into my head, but I'm just wondering, did I blink and miss it in the story? Going back to when our trio signed over their quote unquote life rights to
Mm-hmm.
make this movie,
Mm-hmm.
Mabel was pretty adamant and particular about what it was that she wanted in return. And
Mm-hmm.
I do not remember them saying what that was. Did I
They
miss that?
didn't. They didn't
They
unless
didn't.
I missed it too.
They didn't directly. I think the most we got was in the final scene when they've caught the guy and they're still shooting stuff, and Mabel is talking to Maeve, whatever her name is, Bev Mellon.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever Mabel is talking to Bev, and there's a conversation about podcast potential and everything, and it kind of seems like maybe she had struck a deal about being able to kind of have a bunch of like production rights or be able to produce more podcasts under her own name or something like that. That's the closest we get to any hint or clue about what it is, that it might just have something to do with her being more able to accept that she is a podcaster and that's her thing and that
Mm-hmm.
she'd have more than one.
Okay. I like that.
But past that, it's not really explicitly said.
In that moment, what I was I hadn't made that connection, but that's helpful. In that moment, what I was thinking was, is she kind of insinuating that she wants to podcast by herself away from Oliver and Charles?
Yeah. I kind of there's a couple of moments, also when Howard is trying to get Mabel on board with doing his podcast and everything. I think that's kind of hints and clues to her having made that deal. And yeah, still we don't really have full direct confirmation that that's what her stipulation was. Um, and I don't know if we ever will get full direct confirmation. A lot of the time, Mabel is the one that gets the least amount of through line,
Mm-hmm.
weirdly,
Yeah.
between seasons. Um, Normally that's displayed in her romances, but that's neither here nor there. It I don't know if we will ever get full confirmation. I don't even know if necessarily I am like dying to know or need to know.
Mm-hmm.
But them returning to the bit where she's doing podcasts and like that's become her identity, and whether she do it with other people or one by herself, it's an interesting thing for them to explore later on, that I think they have kind of set up for them to at least acknowledge in the future.
Mm-hmm. I am really interested to see where it goes. We are spoiled with other things that we watched this week, other than just Agatha All Along and Only Murders in the Building. And fingers
Mhm.
crossed, eventually we're going to be spoiled with a season 2 of Agatha All Along and a next season of Only Murders in the Building. I think the Only Murders one might already be guaranteed. I can't remember. But I'll open
Yes.
up the question with the limited amount of time that we have left to what else you watched or read this week that sticks out to you. Something that makes the like 1 minute cut, you know?
Okay. I can go. I finished season 3 of Legends of Vox Machina. It's good. You've heard me kind of have some worrisome complaints, as I always do every season of the show, with what they've changed and what they've kept from the original. Uh, in the end, I think it was worthwhile. I can still say that if I had to pick between original and new, it's still original. I think I prefer the nuance, but they did their best in translating, hours and hours of content into these few episodes, and I think they did an excellent job. And in the end, I got some of the most iconic lines that I wanted out of Vex specifically. I think romance was the star of this season, and I'm so happy it was.
Man, I still need to go back and watch it. And every time you talk about it, I'm like dying to go watch it. But then it's like there's something else on
Hmm.
my list I have to watch
Oh,
first.
yeah, you need to watch it. You definitely need to watch it. And there are certain moments that you'll see it. And even though you don't know the original context, you will know specifically the moment that I am having a hard time with.
I'm excited. I'll be watching it with Peter, and he'll be able to offer me some
Yeah,
insight on
I'm
the
sure.
original as well, which will be good.
Yeah.
Carrie, what about you? What else did you watch or read or whatever this week?
A trio of shows, and I will sort of touch on each of them as efficiently, as quickly as I possibly can. So the Penguin just finished its limited series run. I do not know if it's going to get season two, but that's with Colin Farrell and Kristen Milioti. Fantastic, fantastic show about villains versus villains versus villains. They found a way to make us care about the most evil, vile people in Gotham City, almost to the point where we could not see or not want Batman to come and get them. And then at the end, they found a way to not only make us hate a character that we have grown to love, but make us absolutely root for Batman stopping him. That's freaking fantastic stuff. I mean that's good stuff. Um, and it should win all the awards that are coming its way. I've also watched Superman and Lois. I think there are three more episodes to go. In the most recent episode, they've done something with the Man of Steel character that I don't think any other property has done, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but um, it's fantastic stuff. Um, Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch have done fantastic work in this final season, and they've left no stone unturned in terms of telling the story and saying, "Hey, last season we know we've got to do it." So they've taken full advantage of a final season. I highly recommend watching this final season. And I've also watched The Irrational. That's with Jesse L. Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting show. I will say, in terms of my level of whelmed, underwhelmed, or appropriately whelmed, it has become, unfortunately, sort of an incident of the week kind of show,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. It can be fun. I just think that they're sort of missing this sort of overarching or sort of like season long narrative that sometimes is in the forefront, sometimes is in the background. But I think they're sort of missing that. I do not know if they plan to sort of pick that up in the next few episodes, but I can palpably sense that that is missing. Doesn't mean it's any less of a show, but I don't think it's as deep as it could be, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still fun, right? And at the end of the day, I'm here to have fun. So those are the three shows that I have watched past few weeks.
I still need to also get into the latest season of the Irrational, but with Superman and Lois, I've kind of been saving it up because I want to watch it right before I'm about to record a podcast about it, which is coming up. And I have heard nothing but good about the last season, which is great. So I'm very, very excited to dive into it.
You won't be disappointed.
I I I trust I won't be disappointed. I'm so excited. I may actually be getting into it in the next couple days. Um, the what else I'll watch this week, which I've mentioned the past couple times, is High Potential. Um, it just keeps getting better and better. That is just an excellent show. It is funny. It is heartwarming. It's got some mystery in terms of like mystery of the week that feels very nostalgic to like when mystery of the week shows were like really good. I just can't recommend it highly enough. Fantastic cast. They're definitely going for like your classic annoying slow burn romance, and it's good, and it's what it just I recommend that very highly. Now it's in its first season, so they need to maintain this quality and not piss me off. But excellent. Woman of the week. since I'm here, I'll kick us off on Woman of the Week. My Woman of the Week is Joan from The Bachelorette. In just a couple minutes, the finale of the Golden Bachelorette will be airing. Joan is our first Golden Bachelorette. And the reason I picked her is because as I've been watching the season, I've realized that she has had a pretty daunting task. It not daunting because, oh, boo, all men are awful, like any of that. Not at all. Actually, she's had a truly fantastic set of men to work with, and they've done really great job with this silly, heartwarming reality show that, like, who knows if it's going to end up well for them, but they're going to like bond and have a good time type thing. But in reality shows in general, you pretty consistently always have situations where folks are embarrassed intentionally, right? You'll have your silly eat dumb food and run, do zombie football and wear this face paint and jump into a bucket of marshmallows. You know what I'm saying? Your typical embarrassing stuff. The go on stage and do a talent and people, and you play this hokey music, whatever. And the first season of the Golden Bachelor, where we had all the women, one of the things everybody liked about it was, number one, the women did not give a shit. So they were funny, they had life experience, they were very entertaining to watch. And it didn't matter if they had to like go do a talent or do this or the other. They didn't have that sort of like performative self-consciousness that a 20-year-old has. No offense to 20-year-olds. Shout out Kate. They thank you very much. They had the sort of like seasoned older women, they don't really care what you think about them kind of thing. But I realized this season when we got into the Golden Bachelorette is that the dynamic with older men was very different. Yes, they are very funny. They are much funnier. They are much more interesting. They have much more life experience. They have much more personality. They have much more talents. They have much more everything. All those things. However, they actually were very clearly more sensitive than your typical 20-year-old man to something that would be vaguely embarrassing. You throw a bunch of like drunk 20-year-old men, 25, 27, whatever, on a show like this, and you have them like, oh, go play poker, zombie, football, whatever, and jump through whatever and try to, corral sheep and do, whatever. And they're all like completely incompetent and they embarrass themselves, but they really don't care because they are like drunk and 25. And with these men, it was actually very clear they wanted to come across like nice, respectful, human, whatever. And the entire season, Joan had a really tough task where she did have to get emotion and funny moments and all of that out of them, but never in a way that embarrassed them, to the point where they had like a Chippendales week, even where the guys had to like strip and do their like Chippendales dance and whatever, but they had it be to like raise money for Stand Up to Cancer, and they made it like this still noble thing. They didn't play hokey music. They didn't make things like teasy and making fun. The men were always in on the joke, and it was always fun, and they always came out looking like respectful and great. And I think Joan had a lot to do with it. So I just hats off to her on writing that perfect balance with an audience that the show, or a set of men that the show's never had to work with before. They've never had this unique thing of like, these are folks who do actually not want to be embarrassed, and she did it well.
Good deal.
Good.
Who's up next?
I can go. So I'll just quickly say, I know I'm a broken record, and look me in the eyes when I tell you I do not care. My favorite, once again, is Vex. I know I just talked about her. I'm going to do it again.
We love you so much.
Thank you. So as a fan of Critical Role, there's certain times where you're a little bit starved, and there's certain times where there's like a gush of content that you can try to consume. And so we had Legends of Vox Machina. I was so appreciative that in the final parts we got, the iconic lines of, I want a heart, or I want arrows through her heart and one through her mouth as she screams. chef's kiss. And then I like the, you know, when she's weeping and crying, there's this whole love confession. And again, that's a whole different aspect of her love story with Percy that they've kind of switched and like reordered a lot of things. And that was why I had some issues with it. But again and again, when it comes down to getting those moments, it's done so beautifully and it's acted so efficiently, so beautifully. And the moments are just really, really heartbreaking, heart wrenching, warm, like, just so good. But then on the other side of it, with the actual campaign, we also, in campaign 3, so the third game, third group of characters, we're having this world ending event, and all three groups of characters are involved. So we're getting a return of Vex, 30 years older. She's regal, she has a bunch of kids, and she is still just as awesome as she's ever been. And she kind of comes in with an even more just calming but in charge, practical, let's get this done and let's get this done correctly kind of tone. Also being light and humorous. And it's so much about her character that I really adore. That, you know, she doesn't take herself too seriously, but she also takes the moment seriously. And she knows how to get everybody within the group on the same page and moving very very quickly to accomplish a goal. And that's why I've always loved her as a character, is the mixture of tenderhearted and, you know, kind of tactical practical machine. And that combination that sometimes it like people go for that as a combination of character and it doesn't always succeed, and that character really gets at that. So that's my woman of the week. Just I got two versions of her this week.
I love that.
Awesome. Um, my woman of the week is, I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but it's Lauren LaFranc. Um,
Mhm.
it could be Lauren LaFranc, I'm not exactly sure. But she is the showrunner for The Penguin, and she's also been a writer and producer on shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and
Mhm.
other things that you've probably heard about. Um, and so, as showrunner of The Penguin, she's taking this series directly from the moments that happened at the end of the Batman movie by Matt Reeves. And obviously, Matt Reeves deserves a lot of credit for creating a movie and a universe and a world that people are particularly interested in. But one of the criticisms that you could have had for the Batman was that that movie's version of Batman was very young and early into his career. And for many reasons, he did not have a lot of layers and a lot of depth to his character. Good story still, but he didn't have those things because he doesn't have them yet.
Mhm.
Whereas the Penguin is a show about a character, Oz, who's at the center of this story, who's multifaceted, has significant depth and layers, and she has to sort of craft and follow this vision for telling his story while also simultaneously telling the story of a character that was just introduced for the show. And sort of weave a narrative and weave a story where both of them are essentially the stars, and they're not like good, nice protagonists. They are indeed antagonists, and they sort of have this um, delicious sense of um, sort of sinking into what it is that they do. They both come at it from certain different ways. But what I appreciate about what Lauren LaFranc did was she found a way again to tell their stories separately and also figure out a way to how to tell their stories together in terms of how they impacted each other because they have this history. And again, going back to the Batman, it was a singular narrative of the Batman. This one has multiple stories to tell, and she did them succinctly, efficiently, and with incredible sort of depth. And I certainly appreciate it. I will say it, and I love Only Murders in the Building. I love Agatha all along, but I will fight tooth and nail with anyone who tells me that there's a show that came out this year that's better than The Penguin. It's been fantastic stuff. I suspect it will win all of the awards, and I hope that she gets the proper credit that she deserves. Because a lot of people, when they think about the Batman and they think about the Penguin, they think about Matt Reeves, and rightfully so. He's certainly an executive producer on the show, But in terms of what the end product was, that had everything to do with Lauren Frank, and it's just been one of the best shows this year, and she deserves a lot of credit for it. She's my woman of the week.
We all had great picks this week. You all have got me very excited to watch The Penguin, Vox Machina season 3, and Superman and Lois final season. Amongst other things, we've for the past couple shows had a very heavy main episode to talk about with Only Murders in the Building and Agatha all along and some other things going on. So I'm actually excited to get back to our lighter weeks where we can dive for more than just 1 minute into what else we watched this week. And we will get there in a couple weeks, probably in December. We'll see what is airing between now and then and what we want to talk about. But at some point, we'll be diving into what else we watched this week. Thank you all for joining me. Carey and Kate's information is in the description down below if you want to chat with them about anything. And I will see you all in a couple weeks. Bye.